Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rumors versus Facts, a UGASports live production. My name is Ronnie DeBolsey. I'm joined by Jed May, the recruiting insider at UGAsports.com. And he and I are both in Indianapolis, Indiana for the NFL Combine. Jed's been coming up here the last 3 or 4 years. I've been coming many years prior to that. Just Jed's turn now, but I got stuck with him this year because I couldn't pawn it off on somebody else. So it's Jed, myself, and Harrison Reno, the fantastic intern, covering it for UGAsports.com. And a big, busy day on day one. Get to speak to inside linebacker C.J. Allen, Punter Brett Thorson, and defensive lineman Christian Miller. The last two were very funny. You know, those guys hold court wherever they go. Christian Miller was in rare form today. He absolutely engaged the entire NFL beat media here. But we'll start with where everything does, right there with C.J. Allen, a potential first-round pick, a guy who's trying to prove that he's a three-down guy. And, he talks about leadership. He's such a team-first guy. He's not here to make jokes. He's here to play football. And, Jed, he actually had some interesting comments about the Bulldogs, Raylan Wilson, leadership, and what he's not doing tomorrow.
Yeah, he's not doing any drills tomorrow. He's not running the 40. He's not doing on-field stuff, any of that. He's doing that at pro day, which is probably in about 3 weeks, right about the time when spring practice starts. And I guess that's his prerogative because that's like you were saying earlier. We were talking about it. It's a controlled environment. It's a place that CJ Allen and these other guys are obviously very comfortable. It's with they're around staffers who are more comfortable. It's more time to train, all that stuff. So it's understandable why they'd wait. It's a bummer for us because we were looking forward to seeing what he'd be able to do tomorrow. But yeah, he said it was interesting. I asked him about Raylan Wilson, and he said, "Yeah, we know what he can do on the field. He's sideline to sideline. He's explosive. He can hit all that stuff." CJ Allen said, "I'm looking forward to seeing how he leads because if you think about it, the past few years, it's always like there's always two linebackers that are the same age. It kind of feels like whether it's Jamon Dumas Johnson, Smile London, uh, C.J. Allen, and Raylan Wilson. Raylan Wilson is the oldest guy in that room. Like it's his room to command. So it'll be an interesting dynamic to see how he leads. Chris Cole, Justin Williams, Aiden Walker, Anthony Crua, the freshman that just came in. It's his room next year, and C.J. Allen is excited to see what he does with it.
Yeah, no, he'll be the one calling the defense and, have the head set, these phone basically in his helmet, which he's done before. It passes around, but I'm very excited to see what Raylan Wilson doing. And here's the thing, is when we got back here, I was actually asked, we're actually in the hotel now. I got a text from a guy I know who, again, he's not an NFL scout, but he talks to all the NFL scouts. He talks to all the – he's a guy to know. He's a guy to know. He's like he's the one that actually said, I thought Brett Thorson would be funnier. I'm like, hey, idiot, did you not watch the whole thing? The jokes are at the end. Brett Thorson tried to stay in character and, it's all about punting. But once we kind of got past all the, hey, have you talked to the Cleveland Browns? Have you talked to the Dallas Cowboys? Have you met with the Eagles? Then, Brett Thorson kind of cut loose on that Aussie charm. But he was actually asking me, he's like, what Raylan Wilson have to say today? And I'm like, he's not here. He's like,
he's not here. Yeah.
he's going back. He should be here. And I'm like, it's a big get that he's returning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because we were talking about C.J. Allen doing the drills earlier and proving he's a 3-down guy. Raylan Wilson is that hyper red. Like I remember I went to see him in high school and he was returning kickoffs for his team in Florida. So I mean, just an uber athletic guy who's gotten better and better as a linebacker as it goes along. And that's a guy who you thought, or I thought anyway, could put up some really impressive numbers here. Not to say C.J. Allen can't, but somebody asked C.J. Allen today if he considers himself a throwback linebacker or how much of a throwback linebacker is he. And like on the one hand, that's cool because we all love the image of Dick Butkus and I guess Ray Lewis to a certain extent. But on the other hand, when you've got football that is so modern and spread out and teams are pass heavy, that's not necessarily the greatest connotation for a linebacker to have. So, and he said, look, I'm a guy that can do everything. I can rush the passer, I can play in space, whatever. But Raylan Wilson's that guy too, and perhaps even more so. So a big get for Georgia to get him back. And it's going to be very exciting to see what he does in drills next year, whether it's here at the Combine or at Pro Day.
Yeah, C.J. Allen, I mean, we know he can be Mike Singletary, just standing back there with the crazy eyes. stuff in the run, but can he also be a Roquan Smith, running guys down in space, picking up the running back out of the backfield, going with the tight ends, dropping into coverage, being third, a three down linebacker, as Coach Donovan mentioned the other day. That's something he needs to prove he can do. And I just thought it was interesting that he won't be doing any of that tomorrow. One guy we will see, or at least I'm hoping to see tomorrow, and I saw Bo Gardner warming up, so we know that Brett Thorson should be punting. But we didn't get a chance to ask Christian Miller if he was actually going to be participating. But I'm thinking that's a guy who's, with his quickness and his speed, I'm like, anytime he can show that off, he needs to be out there tomorrow with a defensive lineman. I mean, you don't get excited to watch guys do, 3-cone drills and stuff like that and L drills, but when you get to watch a guy move like Christian Miller, that's
Mhm.
a
Yeah, and that's kind of the when you think of what George has done at the combine the last few years, you think of Jordan Davis, you think of Devontae White, you think of these huge guys who get here and move like guys that are
Trayvon
30 or
Walker.
40 pounds
Yeah,
lighter. Yeah. So yeah, and I think like you said, we didn't get to ask Kristen today because his interview got cut a little short, but yeah, that's a guy who and I think there's a lot of several anyway Georgia guys at the combine who have a chance to really help themselves with good performances here. You think of Kristen Miller, you think of, I'm sure we'll talk about him in a little bit, but Oscar Delt, who we're supposed to talk to tomorrow, Dalen Everett for that matter. Monroe Freeling is a guy who has got a lot of pre-draft hype. So I think it's a chance for a lot of these guys to prove themselves to the next level because Kristen Miller is we hear so much about these Georgia defensive linemen. Oh, the system keeps them from putting up big stats. We heard that about Trayvon Walker when he was coming out,
we did. We heard
and
that about Michael Williams.
it's a chance. Yeah, it's a chance to show that your skills. And this makes it sound like we're saying Georgia's like screwing these kids, and they're obviously not because they're sending guys to the NFL. But it's a chance to prove that your skills maybe go beyond what it just looks like on paper if you're just counting sacks, tackles for loss, catches for some of these guys on the offensive side.
I always factor in like this when you're an offensive line. Go back last year, offensive line was not great. Just too many injuries. 4 of those guys got drafted. I mean, just
Mhm.
that's mind boggling. And Jared Wilson was one of the first guys taken and played 1 year. But people say, well, if you didn't put up crazy offensive numbers, you guys didn't score, as like a Patrick Mahomes led team, then why did you take so many of Georgia's offensive linemen? I'm like, because they don't do RPOs all day long. They do actual pass pro. They run a pro
Mhm.
style offense. So every general manager, every head coach watches a Georgia offensive lineman and says, I can plug and play that guy, for the offense that we run. Same with Georgia's defensive lineman. We can go gap control. We can pressure the quarterback. We can stop the run. We can run twists. We can run stunts. I'm watching them do it. I'm not going to get caught up in what kind of stats they have because you can have 45 sacks in college. That doesn't get you a sack in the NFL. It means jack. It means, okay, great. But did you stop people? Oh, you're when you didn't get a sack, they ran the ball all down your throat. They ran away from you. So I'm just agreeing with you in a roundabout way. When the Christian Miller gets out there and shows what he can do, they're like, this is a kid with the size, uh,
Mhm.
knowledge. They run a very complicated scheme at Georgia, and he can do. We can give him any responsibility, and he knows what to do in those situations. So I think he's really going to show what he can do. But that's the boring stuff. Let's talk about the fun stuff. So let's talk about Kirby Smart busting on Christian Miller. I want you to tell the story that he told us.
Yeah, somebody asked him. It's something about Kirby. I don't remember what it was. Oh, it was he referenced Kirby Smart being on the mic at practice. Somebody asked what was your favorite um, moment of Kirby Smart busting on you at practice. He said, "Man, it was a summer workout. It was 110 degrees." And he didn't specify what year, so it could have been this past year or whatever. But it's big Kristen Miller. It's out of shape. You're getting in shape for the season, and poor Kristen Miller, he's huffing and puffing. He can't breathe. He's struggling through it. And Kirby Smart's on the microphone a second. Oh, I can't. Oh, what is this, C Mill? I can't breathe. Oh, I can't breathe. He got heckled pretty good. It sounded like, and the great thing about it is knowing how Kirby Smart talks to these guys, this very well could have been this past summer when Christian Miller is going to be a senior leader on his football team. So yeah, it's a ruthless world out there. A lot of guys talk about it, and we hear it on the occasions we go to practice. Kirby Smart's ruthless with those guys, and that Kristen Miller, Kristen Miller's no exception, for sure. That was pretty funny. He looked back on it fondly. I would bet he didn't think so fondly of it in the moment, but it's one of the things you can look back on and laugh about now. Now that you're on the verge of starting your NFL career.
Oh yeah, you can look back and get and laugh like I got busted one time sneaking into my girlfriend's house. Yeah, we all think that's funny now. I didn't think it was so funny at the time, but I got the call from her dad going, "Get your ass back over here." I'm like, "Oof!" So
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
it was funny now. It was funny back then. Uh, he also talked about because again, Christian Miller came out and he just does his he walks up, taps the microphone. Oh, we're loud here, and he just went to town.
Hmm.
I mean,
Hmm.
I don't want. I won't say he was clowning around. He's gregarious. He's fun loving,
Well,
and
and
he's like,
he's
hey, look,
he's he's been like that going back since he was a recruit. I mean, he was the
yeah,
um, you know, first class of recruits I covered when I started here. And I mean, I went to probably three or four Cedar Grove games, and he was always like that after games. His commitment ceremony was a ton of fun. And then that's just the guy. It's always the defensive lineman. It's Jordan Davis.
yeah.
It's Kristen Miller. It's Devontae Wyatt. It's Nazir Stackhouse. I mean, what we've heard about, we haven't talked to him a lot, but Joseph Jonah Ajonye is like that. Warren Brinson's like that. Like it's
Boko.
always
Yeah.
it's always these defensive linemen, at least over the past uh, 4 or 5 years or whatever, that have got the big personality that Christian Miller's definitely living up to that pedigree pretty well.
I think Trey Scott walks in and goes, make me laugh," and you'll get an offer to come play at
Yeah,
the
that's
Wings.
your
He does it.
yeah, that's like you have the on field like the camp workouts in the summer. He does that in January. Like that's his version of the camp workout in January. Like you got 5 minutes to make him laugh, and he's either in or out.
So to that point, he got up there and he was he brought up, yeah, and so and so get I had my welcome to Georgia moment, and we're like, well,
Mhm.
elaborate, please. And he mentioned that Micah Morris did, and I'll tell this one. He said that Micah Morris was blocking him. And he's like that first year or something like that. And he talks about how Micah Morris is just an absolute freak of a human being. And we know that Coach Don said on the show the other day that Micah Morris is not only maybe the strongest Georgia player on the team now. He says he might be one of the strongest to ever come through. And I started thinking about that, and I'm like, man, I know some absolute behemoths, but that's what Micah Morris did.
Mhm.
And Christian Miller, with no exaggeration, he said he blocked me to the offensive sideline. And I was
Mhm.
like, damn. You,
That's
you
a
can see it when you get a
long
big
way.
on a little, that you
Mhm.
get the pull, they run count or something like that. And you get to go out there, and all of a sudden it's a cornerback coming in or a linebacker, and you get to put an inside linebacker, you get to put a big body on him. But he took Christian Miller, who's not a small man, and drove his ass
Mhm.
off the field. And because he was just talking about how he mentioned a lot of the great offensive linemen that he had faced over the years. He even gave a shout out to Devin Willock, rest in peace. And he mentioned, going up against Tate Radledge and Dylan Fairchild. But when he says Micah Miller, I mean, he said that's just different. We're going to get to see him on Saturday.
Could you imagine? Like, obviously, we don't know the timelines on these things, but could you imagine if you're Kristen Miller and it's the middle of July, you're in a summer workout, and you got Kirby Smart just destroying you, and then you're like, okay, new like fall camp, new me, I'm ready to go. And one of the first practices of fall camp, you get Micah Morris blocking you onto Lumpkin Street. You're like, I wonder if this is like if this is really for me after all.
Micah
Maybe I
Morris
should
and
consider
Tate
another line of
Radledge on a
work.
duo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. But yeah, no, we get Micah Morris and Monroe Freeling on Saturday. Tomorrow we get Oscar Delp and Dalen Everett, and then Friday is receiver day. So Colby Young, Zachariah Branch, and De La Belle. So it's a well I guess spaced out group of guys this year. Every position other than quarterback, obviously, and running back is kind of represented. So it's interesting to see kind of the different perspectives of a lot of these guys who. And Christian Miller was 4 years, Oscar Delps 4 years, Micah Morris was 5 years, I
Five.
guess. I mean, a lot of guys who have not a lot of, or not as many anyway, like early declaration guys. Like a CJ Allen went early. Um, and he might be the only one. I guess Zachariah Branch was early, but he was obviously on Georgia 1 year. So a lot of guys who were in this Georgia program for a long time, giving their perspective on what the past 4 years were like.
Yeah, I guess Monroe left a year early, but that's about it. And it's funny
Monroe,
because
yeah,
normally when we come here, it's a bunch of juniors, with the seniors sprinkled in because that's just the way they've been able to recruit. But when you talk about Mike Morrison, all his years here, and Christian Miller doing his time, and I thought it was interesting because somebody actually asked Christian Miller, "Why didn't you come out last year?"
hmm
And you and I'm pretty sure we had a story in admin about Christian Miller declares early for the NFL draft. I'm pretty sure I
for sure,
remember
yeah.
seeing that, and then we deleted it when he decided to stick around. So, uh, tell people why he decided not to go early.
Yeah, he basically said, I wasn't ready to be a pro. I wasn't doing things the way I needed to off the field. I mentioned taking notes in meetings and, things like that, like acting like a pro. And it made me think of what Oscar Delp said, I guess it was maybe in the spring, where Oscar Delp said he, in 2024, had a foot out the door at times. And I feel like and I wonder how much we'll hear similar sentiments, from Dalen Everett, from maybe Michael Morris, of guys who wanted to, like, yeah, they could have gone, and Oscar Delp would have been drafted last year, Kristen Miller would have been drafted last year, but guys who wanted to come back. I mean, Kristen Miller mentioned graduating and being a team captain as two things he wanted to accomplish too. So,
He said he left a
guys
lot
who
of money on the table.
yeah, so guys who wanted to come back to do things for unfinished business, wanting to win, but also wanting to make sure they were ready for this moment, when the time came. And Christian Miller, I mean, he said at the Sugar Bowl last year, before he even made this decision, he had grown up a lot, over the course of his Georgia career. And last year he had a bunch of injuries, and that unfortunately to grow up a little bit. Um, so a lot of guys who have come a long way since they got on campus. Christian Miller, I think, is the poster child of that, going from where he was as a freshman to, where he's at now 4 years later.
Yeah, I remember Nazir Stackhouse had a very similar story talking about how he just wasn't happy at first and then came around. It was also interesting that when he mentioned one of the people that helped Christian, or when Christian mentioned one of the guys that helped him grow up, if you will, mature, was Will Muschamp. And he says, he would stand beside me and we'd talk a bunch, smack and stuff like that. But uh, he said that Will Muschamp explained to him, if you want to come in and play as a true freshman, play really early, it's hardest to do the closer to the ball you get. And I'm
hmm
like, I hadn't heard that phrase since probably Todd Grantham was the last guy I heard even mention it. Because he was doing it with like Alec Ogletree. Alec came in and played safety. He's like, look, if you really want to make millions and you want to be a superstar, I need to move you to linebacker. I got to get you closer to the ball, and the closer you get, the harder it is. So
hmm
shout out to all the zero techniques in the centers, baby. That's where the
Yeah,
fight
and
starts.
we were talking about it earlier. That makes you think of how impressive it was that Elijah Griffin played as much as he did, that Dontrell Glover and Juan Gaston did what they did, like, to come in and make those contributions. I mean, where would this offensive line have been if Juan Gaston and Dontrell Glover weren't ready this year? I mean, let's be honest. They helped piece this thing together, especially early in the year. So, um, again, part of it is the Kirby Smart's talked about how much less depth there is now compared to a few years ago, but also part of it is how impressive those freshmen were, this year, to carve out that playing time.
Yeah. Speaking of impressive, we got to speak to Brett Thorson, and Brett Thorson's he's just an absolute riot. It's funny how many while we were waiting on him because he showed up late. It wasn't his fault. It's just everything was running smooth. Then all of a sudden, I don't know what happened, but like all the a bunch of the defensive linemen, uh, the timing got messed up. We're used to getting one guy at, like, say, 11, then one at 11:20, one at 11:40. It's
hmm
like 11:40, and none of those guys are there, and they have all the signs up, and it was just absolute confusion. It was very poorly run today compared to what it normally is. But Brett Thorson was supposed to be there, and he showed up really, really late. And I'm thinking, is he being held back for medical testing? Because sometimes that happens. but it was
Hmm.
all the place kickers and all the specialists, and a couple of them came through, and we're like, man, I felt bad because some of these guys, there's nobody there asking them questions. And then let's like say Bain for Miami, it's 40
Hmm.
reporters deep, and then you got a place kicker from say Syracuse, and he's just kind of standing there like, how long do I have to stand here looking at nobody? So it's
Hmm.
funny. I started asking a couple of them questions, and it's funny. All of them knew Brett Thorson, and they all had a story about him, and they all had to talk about how hilarious he was. And he got up there, and he there were questions about what do you do when you're a punter? What is the
Hmm.
interview process like? And he said it was he referred it to like speed dating. He says sometimes you go in there and there's four people, like four coaches sitting at a table, and you talk to all of them. Then you go to the next table with four, and I'm like, it ain't like that for the other guys. But
Hmm.
his funniest thing though was at the end, somebody kept asking about Kamari Lassiter. You can tell when one of the reporters has, I don't want to say an agenda, but they've got a story idea.
Hmm.
So they realize they're going to write about Kamari Lassiter and what his former Georgia teammates remember about him. So
Hmm.
when you get through with the questions, you get to that one, and he just, I'm not saying he tore into Kamari Lassiter, but he passed judgment on Kamari Lassiter. Do you want to tell him what he said?
Yeah, it was basically. The funny thing is like the questions asked, and he's like, "Yeah, Kamari's a great player, whatever." But then, and he basically launched into this thing about how he puts whipped cream on top of ice cream, and how that's like a crime against humanity or whatever, and that's unacceptable. And it like this whole, and this typical Brett Thorson, like he gives you just the tiniest bit of like not genuine, but like he kind of answers the question like directly, and then he veers off on this whole. Oh, and by the way, he's a war criminal because he puts whipped cream on ice cream. So yeah, it's I'm gonna miss interviewing Brett Thorson because we got him a lot, especially considering he's a punter over the last couple of years, and he's always it's a fun time talking to him because he's a very, like you said, gregarious guy. Easy to talk to, and he's a great punter. I mean, you look at it, it's weird to think it feels like he just got to Georgia, but I mean, he's been here 4 years. He was here a long time, longer than I really had realized. Because he had the waivers a couple times and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, he ended up getting 4 years.
No,
And
you're right
it's
because
great career.
people actually, yeah, there were a lot of people like, well, this is his last year, and we actually broke the news. We're like, no, he's applying for a waiver, because he started at a different school, and his NCAA timer started earlier. I think when he was still in
Hmm.
Australia, and everyone's like, oh well, he's done. I'm like, hang on a second. So we broke that story, and then sure enough, I think he got like 2 years out of it. So
Hmm.
shout out to him for making it through. And he said, look, with Peyton Woodring back there, you've got a great kicker, and he raved about the punters. He's leaving behind. He's like, Georgia's in good hands. I can't wait to see what those guys can do. Which is, I'm not saying it's par for the course to rave about the guys in your room, but if he thought Georgia was going to be, if Georgia needed work, Brett Thorson's kind of got to tell it
I
to
think
you.
he'd say so. Yeah, I agree with you for sure.
He'd be like, I don't know what the hell they're going to do. The kicking's good, the punting, who knows? But
Hmm.
he was quite the riot there. Uh, so tomorrow we get Oscar Delp. I think I hope we get the Oscar Delp we used to get in high school.
Hmm.
The Oscar Delp who wasn't the automaton that Kirby Smart kind of made him into. Because Kirby Smart had a bunch of guys that he likes to bring out and make to give us access to. Oscar Delp Lawson's better at it. London Humphreys was one. Uh, there's a few guys I can't think of. There's a few that are just they won't say anything. I don't mean they don't talk. They'll talk for like 30 seconds, 40 seconds when you ask a question, but they're so smart that they don't say
Hmm.
anything. And you're like, that's just like nine cliches stitched together in a
Hmm.
coherent answer, but you didn't say anything. But when you can get Oscar Delp to, I don't say let his hair down, but to be Oscar Delp, he can be very intriguing and interesting.
Hmm.
And of course, Dalen Everett, is always the consummate professional. So I don't know that we'll have the same fireworks tomorrow, but there's the potential because
Hmm.
now that Kirby's not looking over their shoulder, these guys can actually give us some good stuff. I'm looking forward to it. Uh, then, of course, like you said, we've got the Friday is the quarterbacks. That's going to be
Quarterbacks and
interesting.
and receivers, yeah, because there's, I mean, it's not especially our problem. But I mean, you think of all the quarterback storylines, because I think Colby Young is going at the same time as Diego Pavia, which is going to be a circus. Fernando Mendoza and Ty Simpson are going at the same time. I think at 8. Um, Carson Beck's going. All these Drew Aller is going at the same time as maybe Branch and Dylan Bell. Like, there's a lot of different quarterback storyline. I mean, Garrett Nussmeier. All there's a lot of different quarterback storylines. Kind of looking at it from someone who's covering the combine and not Georgia players at the combine. It's a very interesting day as quarterbacks go. But yeah, we've got 3 guys who, have got different skill sets, and it's like CJ Allen. Like, you wonder. I think Zachariah Branch is the guy that everybody wants to see, at least that I want to see work out, because he could run a 40. The shuttle stuff is that's what he did all year, right? Is make people miss in short areas like that, going through drills. And I think Oscar Delp too. Like, Oscar Delp can help himself. I mentioned Kristen Miller earlier with the stats. Oscar Delp, we've seen all these um, draft analysts or whatever posting random clips of Oscar Delp over the past few weeks. Like, hey, look what this dude can do with the ball in his hands. Look how open he is on this route. And it's a chance for Delp to show too, like, hey, I haven't gotten a ton of catches over the past few years, but my skill set is very conducive to what your offense can do at the next level. And I think that he can earn himself some money with a good performance on Friday. So yeah, it's interesting. Again, this isn't the year where Georgia's going to have 5 first-round picks. This isn't they're not going to have a guy go in the top probably 20, top 15. But there's some very interesting storylines from a combine perspective and pro day too, of guys who have big opportunities to move themselves up boards with some good performances.
Yep. I agree 100%. I'll be looking forward to seeing some of the questions that they asked Fernando Mendoza. Hey, how close he's come to get to Georgia? Somebody asked me if we reported on Fernando Mendoza when he was visiting Georgia last year when it was in the transfer portal. I'm like, we pretty much had a daily update on Fernando Mendoza. And I think because it came out about that he tried to call Georgia to commit and then it didn't get
Mhm.
through. And that was God's way of telling him he needed to go to Indiana. I'm like, I'm not going to doubt the story, but I'm also we reported at the time that Georgia really liked where they were sitting with him. Of course, they didn't know he was going to be, Heisman Trophy winner. I said we reported yes, his visit went fine because we had a bunch of insider information on actually how the visit went down, who they met with, who they talked to, his questions, how they were answered. So we had all that stuff, and we're like, could come out and say, yeah, he's coming, but we got as close to that line as we could based on what we had heard, and then it just didn't happen. He wound up going and playing with his brother, which and a lot of it came down to the fact that he wanted not to be guaranteed a place, but he wanted to be know that he's going in to win it, and that in other words, he wanted to know that he's like 80% the guy, and you can't say that at Georgia ever. They
Well,
just
and you literally cannot say he would have been any better off at Georgia, because how could he have been better off in being the surefire number 1 pick and a national champion, and he won the Heisman, didn't he?
yes, he did.
Right. So I mean,
Yeah,
he literally could not have and he got to do it with his brother. So you
right.
literally could not have had a better year than Fernando Mendoza had. And credit to him. That's great. And I think Georgia, um, they had Gunnar Stockton, and he turned into a fan favorite. Some of the plays he made. Now we'll see how it goes going into next year. But yeah, that was a very interesting. I don't know why I saw that. I can't remember if it was a podcast or if he did an interview or what, but I saw that and I was like,
I just saw the tweet.
that's an interesting, you know, from the kids' perspective of how all this went down. Because it's really hard to get a hold of these transfers when they come in on visits and whatever. So to hear his kind of account of how it went down was pretty interesting.
So I'm sure Carson Beck will get a few questions maybe about Georgia as well. And there's it's funny. I actually asked for some of you folks who have watched us for a long time, Xavier Story, if you remember him,
Mhm.
the linebacker at Georgia. I actually got the chance to talk to him today and asked him, and of course, it's not the first question, when the guy walks up to the podium. You wait until they're down to people are kind of like searching for questions because these guys have been talking for 20 minutes. And somebody else actually brought it up. They said, talk about your time at Georgia and then transfer into Arkansas. He said, oh, the transition was great. They made it super easy. And I'm like, well, why? Why did you transfer? And he actually came out and said it was for more opportunity. I'm like, okay, well, that's what we've heard because we've mentioned this numerous times. A lot of guys, when they transfer, it's not for a pile of money, it's for playing time. And
Mhm.
what did he get when he went to Arkansas? Well, he made it to the combine. Would he have made it at Georgia? I don't know. He might have still been second team, but he went to Arkansas, was named a starter, played well, uh, actually was named a team captain, which I thought was pretty impressive. So, and he was one of their representatives for SEC Media Days. So they gave him a chance, and he would. There's no way he would have been the SEC Media Days representative last year at Georgia. No,
Mhm.
wasn't going to happen. But goes to Arkansas, and it worked out well for him. So sometimes the transfer is a win-win for both parties. Yeah, you hate to lose him. The guy was spent like 3 years at Georgia playing,
Mhm.
being part of the team. But uh, everyone's talking about, some of the development that he got at Georgia and how it worked out at Arkansas. Um, well, I'm sure there will be other questions for guys who transferred away from Georgia and guys who transferred to Georgia. I'm sure the USC reporters will be asking, hey, Zach Branch, why the hell did you leave
Mhm.
USC? You
Mhm.
were an All-American, a freshman All-American at USC. We know your sophomore year wasn't incredible, but damn, man, did you really have to leave and do what you did there? So there's a lot of fun stuff that comes out of guys can finally talk about this stuff when they get up to the podium at the combine. So,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's like the one I always think of is Devontae White when he came up uh, three
so mad
years
about
ago,
that.
I guess, and he was phenomenal. And you're like, where's this guy been on Tuesday nights and Monday afternoons for the past 4 years of my life? But it's interesting to see these guys. Um, they're the weird in between where they're not beholden to Georgia anymore, but they're also not obviously drafted and under contract and part of an NFL organization. They're kind of um, in the void, I guess, and they got them and they got their agents and their people around them, and that's it. So it's you can definitely get. I mean, like the Florida guy that was talking before Christian Miller today, who just started swearing left and right, and I was like, all right, dude, like more power. I don't know if your agent would advise that, but more power to you. So yeah, so you get some guys who they stick to the college script that they know, and then you get some guys who let it let it fly let it fly a little bit more.
Yeah. I was looking at my phone here trying to see if I could find out who that was. Yeah, I mean, God has been good to me and helped me get here, and then drops three MFs MF bombs in a row.
About 15 seconds. Yeah, like all right,
I'm
dude.
sorry I
Like
said hell
you did
earlier.
you yeah, he apologized. Yeah, and then
He
he's like,
apologized
well,
for saying
nobody
hell.
called
No
nobody
one said a
called me
word.
out for that because I got the green light to to go all the way in. So
Yeah,
good
but
for
then it
him. So
turned
yeah,
into
we'll see. We'll see what we get tomorrow.
yeah.
And I think Mike will like yeah, it'll be good.
Yeah. I was like, dude, is this Red Fox stand up? I was loving
Yeah,
it.
yeah. It's
Uh,
this
Rich,
is
Richard
this that
Pryor's out
Eddie
here.
Murphy track? Like,
Exactly.
like
Uh, we do need to talk recruiting. This is a recruiting show, and I want to ask you about a couple of guys that we we did not get a chance to talk about it a couple weeks ago. I went down to Miami and interviewed some of the players down there. Uh, one of which was Amari Patterson. This is one of the top
mhm,
wide receivers in the country. Um, it's been had a long visit to UGA, in which remember when that snow thing came down. So they kind of had a
mhm,
snow issue, and the Georgia coach was like, "Hey, just hang out with us. If you're going to be snowed in, be snowed in with us. And if he ever commits to
mhm,
Georgia, we can thank the snow that landed in Athens for helping him out." But he had a long multi-day visit to Georgia that you wrote about. He talked about uh, when Kamon Spell was committed, and how he Spell and Dante Wright, the Georgia commit out on the West Coast, are in a group chat together. And Mr. Spell is trying to get Amari Patterson to commit to Georgia. He's saying, "Hey, come home, baby, come home." And I thought that was very interesting because Patterson showed up with the Florida skull cap on and the Florida gloves, and I told him that I was going to ask him a few questions about Georgia, and took all that stuff off. So, uh, where's your thoughts on Patterson right now? Is Georgia going to get that wide receiver?
Yeah, he's quickly become a priority, and yeah, the multi-day visit. Kirby went to go see him in South Carolina, which anytime Kirby's going, he hits all these schools in Georgia as a relationship builder thing. But if he's going out of state to go see you, then he really wants you. So it seems like it's between Georgia and Florida right now, and it's the group chat thing is interesting on a couple levels. You've got Georgia's five-star running back who fans are already writing off as he's eventually going to flip. He's recruiting a guy to join up. You got Dante Wright, who all these schools are after on the West Coast, Oregon chief among them. He's in on this thing as well. So that's good news for Georgia to kind of try to keep him. Um, and player recruiting is also like Tim Keenan today, the Alabama defensive lineman. He's like, yeah, Georgia almost got me because Jordan Davis was recruiting me so hard. So all this the peer recruiting for these guys matters as much and maybe even more than what the coaches have got going on because they give you the
Oh
real
yeah,
deal of what it's like in the program. So that's huge. And I think he's got official visits. At his official visit, let me check, I think is yeah, it's for the scavenger hunt weekend in May. So that's a weekend that always gets
oh
top
yeah.
targets in town and generally leads to some good results. So we'll see how it goes. It's Georgia, Florida. I think LSU's kind of trying to work its way in there with Lane Kiffin. So we'll see. But Georgia's kind of gotten in a little early and made him a priority. And right now it seems like it's Georgia and Florida. We'll see where it goes from here.
Yeah. One of the other guys I spoke to, well, there's two other wide receivers I spoke to in Miami. Maury Stevens, who's committed to Miami. Um, that was a guy. He talks about, hey, I grew up loving Georgia football. I remember watching Sony Michelle, and he
Hmm.
talked about just the sheer amount of development they do. And he wasn't talking about just the development at wide receiver, or just the development at cornerback, or just the development at quarterback, or a defensive lineman. He's basically said, look, at every position they put guys in the NFL. And I'm like, oh, well, look. And he's one of the last interviews I did that day. We talked to like 15, 16 guys. And I would tell you 13 or 14 of them talked about development at Georgia. And uh, one or two said, hey, they got great NIL, but most of them said, look, if I go to Georgia, I know I'm going to be developed. I'm going to be made into an NFL player. And I just thought it was very interesting that is the narrative, the caricature, if you will, the identification marks on the University of Georgia when these recruits talk about it now. They talk about just how many guys they get to the NFL at every position. And you and I are both old enough to know when Tennessee could come to a defensive lineman, Clemson could come to a defensive lineman, Auburn,
Hmm.
Alabama, all these teams could come to a defensive lineman in the state of Georgia, Derek Brown, and say, look, Georgia hasn't had a defensive lineman drafted in 1,000 years. And there nothing you could say about it. Now Georgia gets a defensive lineman. They're killing it in the NFL, and it's working. So Amari Stevens, who's committed to Miami as a wide receiver, James Coley's working him hard, and his face changed when he starts talking about Georgia. He's like, yeah, I'm committed to Georgia, but I'm going to get up there, I think, June 5th for an official visit. So he's coming.
Hmm.
And the other guy that just blew my doors off, I had not seen him in person yet, was Elias Pearl. Uh, I think that I'm just saying, if Georgia winds up getting Elias Pearl, who mentioned that he has Georgia very high as recruitment, if you're a Georgia fan, you got to be thrilled.
Yeah, because Georgia it's another it makes me think of Craig Dandridge because Georgia was with Pearl and his first I can't remember if his first SEC offer, first offer period. I don't remember exactly one of his first big offers, regardless. And his recruitment has blown up since he wins overall MVP at the Rivals Camp down in Miami, which is got tons of talent there. And now in the rankings that came out this week, he went from unranked to number 77 in the country, which is ridiculous, like ridiculous jump. And Craig
That's
Dandridge
awesome.
did a lot of the Craig Dandridge did a lot of the same thing. Georgia got in early on his recruitment before it blew up, and he ended the cycle and signed with Georgia as a top 50 guy, top 40 guy. I don't remember where he ended up, but credit to James Coley for a great early eval. And when you get these kids that you add all these offers and all, like, it. 'Cause I think a lot of these guys know, okay, a lot of these bigger schools, they wait to check out they get done with their season, they check out guys' junior film and give out a lot of offers from there. But when you're a school like Georgia's done in this case, where you are the first of the one of the first of the big offers to come in, that matters because they know Georgia didn't offer me because Alabama offered me or Florida State offered me or whatever. Georgia offered me because they saw my film, they believe in my potential, they think I could be a good fit for their program, and that matters down the line. So I think Georgia's in a good shape for Elias Pearl. His official visit is, I think it's set. Let me see. I got my little
The fifth and seventh.
magic spreadsheet here. Yes, you are right. Also with Amari Stevens, like you said earlier. So
Yeah.
a couple guys who Georgia. I think Amari Stevens only got offered in January as well. So a couple guys that James Coley is kind of gotten in on over the past month or 6 weeks, and Georgia's looking to make a move for. I think they're in a better position with Pearl than Stevens at the moment, but you got to get him on campus. I don't think Pearl visited in January. I don't think Stevens has ever visited. So better position with Pearl at the moment, but definitely right there for Stevens as well.
Get either one of those two guys, and add
Hmm.
Patterson to it. Yeah, call it a day. Uh, Got to see big offensive tackle Mark Matthews, who, Coach Dunn always talks about the mouth-watering players. If you see Mark Matthews in person, you're like, this looks like a factory, a laboratory built offensive tackle. The guy just, if you had to Michelangelo's drawing an offensive tackle, he's going to draw Mark Matthews. The guy just looks great, and he had some good things to say about Georgia. That's going to be a tough guy to haul into Georgia, but he did rave about Phil Rauscher. Talked about Georgia's development at offensive tackle, and had great things to say about Georgia. Getting him on campus would be big. But I thought it was interesting that J.J. Brown, the offensive tackle from, I think, Parkview,
Hmm.
if I'm not mistaken, went all the way to Miami to compete against those guys. And
Hmm.
when he spoke to me, he told me that he had Georgia on top. Georgia was his leader. A bunch of other guys talked about how much they really liked Georgia. Zion Vilma, who's it? Reed Ramesar? I always forget his name.
Ramsar, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, Reed Ramesar. And again, they're all talking about Georgia's development. They're all talking about Georgia's stuff in the trenches. But it's funny how many of them said that Georgia was one of my first offers.
Hmm.
Some of these guys got offered in eighth grade. And it just goes
Hmm.
to what you're talking about. Georgia ahead of the curve with everybody on Elias Pearl. And same with these big offensive linemen, defensive linemen. Georgia's like, yeah, they were I had Liberty, Middle Tennessee, and then Georgia offered.
Right. Yeah, and it's like there's been so many of those in January where, like you said, it's Liberty, Middle Tennessee. Maybe you'll sprinkle in Purdue or you know uh,
Ball State.
Boston College. What? Yeah, and then and then you got a Georgia offer now. Like there's a lot of those, and I think I mean that's what January is for. And I think if you really want to put a silver lining when your season ends on January 1st, you get started that much quicker on flipping the page and evaluating some of this next recruiting class. So a lot of offers went out, and look at some of these official visits that have been set. Kennedy Jackson's offensive lineman from Parkview, Georgia, was one of his first offers. He's got an official visit set. Darius White's got an official visit set. Um, DJ Huggins is a defensive back. He's got a visit set. Pearl Stevens, um, Torian Rollins plays for Terrence Edwards at Mount Vernon in Georgia. Georgia was one of his first offers. He's got an official visit set. Like these things move so fast in January with these offers going out and these kids' recruitments exploding. It's big. So we'll see how it turns out. But it's a busy. That's why we did these recruiting reset stories for every position over the past couple of weeks because the boards changed so
It
much
completely changed.
in January between new offers. You got kids, some kids committed, some kids put out top fives or whatever. Georgia's in them, not in them. Some kids visited, and that moved like Mark Matthews. He visited Georgia for the first time for one of those junior days. That moved Georgia up his board. Like January is like because everybody thinks it's like, whew, okay, the season's over. Like now it's break time, and it's recruiting like is in high gear in
Yeah.
January because that's where the a lot of the foundation for in this case the 2027 class, the next class up. Um, is set. And Georgia was busy, and now they're gearing up for once spring practice starts. You get these kids on campus like 3 days out of the week. You got kids on campus
Yeah, it's
visiting for
funny how many of
practice,
them
so
I
it's busy.
spoke to. These kids like, "Hey, I'll be there in March," and they were telling
Hmm.
me, "Yeah, coach told me practice starts March 17th, and to go ahead and either be there on the 17th or the 19th or the 21st."
Hmm.
My family, we got our own spring break during that second week, so I'll be there the third week on April 3rd. I'm like, okay, and when the
Hmm.
kids can tell you the date and times of when they're going to be there, you're right. That's been set up ahead of time. And so, anyway, I won't say great job, coaches, for doing your jobs because they're paid handsomely to do this, but
Hmm.
recruiting still matters. The vast majority of your team is still, at least at the University of Georgia, still comes out of recruiting. It's not the transfer portal. You're never going to see them. Georgia sign 40 kids out of the transfer portal like LSU did. You're not going to see them spend $40 million,
Hmm.
in a budget on a roster like LSU's doing. So if you can go out there and get the Elias Pearls who are MVPs, and you find the uh, guys who are going to, I don't say blow up, because that if you're trying to get the 3 and 4 stars as you develop into top picks, that's what you're trying to do at Wisconsin. Georgia's going to go out there and get their. I mean, think about it. Georgia landed 3 of the top 20 tight ends in this past
Hmm.
class. Georgia, like you said, you get an Elijah Griffin, you get an Akini Ogboko, a 5-star offensive tackle in this last class. They get their players, they get the big names. They just don't get 7 5 stars. Now it's like 2 or 3 at most. But that's the way everybody is. Nobody. Alabama's not getting 5 5 stars like they used to. Ohio State's not getting 4 5 stars like they used to. It's impossible to do nowadays. But uh, your Georgia's 1 through 44 are going to be better than anybody else's 1 through 44. So, or usually. So that's the way it is. So that's why recruiting still matters, and that's why we have a show called Rumors versus Facts, and we talk about it. Let's end with a update from our buddy Chad Simmons, talking about a safety who has Georgia #1 today.
Yeah, Jaden Aparicio Bailey from Alabama has Georgia. He put out his list of visits, which is it looks
Nine
like
deep.
a who's who of yeah. It looks like a where am I going to visit to miss the most school. Although a lot of them are on weekends, so I get that. But
Yeah.
yeah, he came right out and told Chad, yeah, Georgia is clearly leading the way in my recruitment right now, which is a pretty bold statement for guys that keep a lot of things close to the vest nowadays. Like, oh yeah, well I'm Georgia's showing a lot of love right now, so that's a
Yeah.
pretty transparent way of saying it. And he's a guy that Georgia has prioritized. He's been on campus a bunch of times, and I think he is the guy in this class who could play a couple different spots. Like I don't really know exactly where he fits in, but I do know that Georgia really wants him. And um, when you look at this class, KJ Bolden is likely going to be gone. Ellis Robinson's likely going to be gone. DeMelo Jones could be gone. But you're going to be you look at Kyron Jones, I think will be gone. So you're going to be replacing a lot in the secondary after this, and that doesn't even count transfers after this 2026 season. So it's another class where you're going to have to load up in the secondary, and Aparicio Bailey's a guy that uh, they've circled, and he's got Georgia circled pretty high on his list too. He will be back for G Day in a few weeks.
Love it. All right, folks, we're going to wrap with that. We will try to do another show tomorrow and recap day 2 of the NFL Combine. And we won't have nearly as much to talk about tomorrow because not quite as many guys, and we won't have as many recruiting updates. So tomorrow's show will be kind of a quick hitter. But be sure to join us on either Facebook, YouTube, or X, where we have these shows being streamed. And if you would hit the follow button, it would mean a lot to us. We grow like crazy during the season, but once the season stops, we slow down in our growth, and we don't want to slow down. We want to keep moving. So please hit the subscribe button. We would greatly appreciate it. We'll talk to you later.